regular people, they'll go out and they'll buy hearing aids, they'll build a house, they'll buy jewelry, and then my clients will come to me because they need more advertising, they need more brochures, right? So see how demand is what really fuels everything. Okay, so what can work? If tax cuts for the wealthy don't work, what can work? Well, when you're really in a bad situation, just at least in the short term, the idea, and this is called, and you may have heard this expression called Keynesian economics, okay, is the idea that when the economy is completely stagnating or spiraling down, so consumers aren't spending money, businesses aren't spending money, and everything is just locked up, the best thing that we can do is spend government money, even borrowed government money, to get money in people's pockets, right? So they'll go out and spend and keep money circulating. Because the more you circulate it, the more revenue and economic activity. So it's not just like if you spend $1, you only get $1 back. It gets circulated over and over again. So this idea worked in Roosevelt's New Deal. Would put millions of people together building our infrastructure. And as you can see from this graph, Obama's stimulus did send GDP in the correct direction, and it started to offset. We lost 7 million jobs, in the last quarter, from the last quarter of 2007. So we're going in the right direction. But the question is, how come it didn't create a whole net gain of jobs? How come it didn't work? How come it didn't get unemployment down below 8%? Well, one of the problems is, you may have heard a lot of economists say it just wasn't big enough. I mean, we have a $15 trillion economy, and only putting about $800 billion isn't going to make that much of a dent. So, but the other reason is, you can see here, is it actually did create jobs, and it did stimulate the economy in China. Okay? Which I don't think was our intention. But here's the problem. And again, we'll explore the policies that got us here. So we see how China dumps its exports on us, but doesn't allow in any of our exports. Okay, and the sad fact is, we don't make TVs or computers or toys or clothes or pretty much of anything except military hardware, pharmaceuticals, and processed foods. So think about it. When we put money in the pockets of regular people with a tax cut or unemployment benefits, what do? They go to Walmart and they buy stuff. And where does most of the money go? To China, which is why China actually had a labor shortage in 2009, and they had to increase their wages from, get this, 80 cents an hour to $1.14 an hour. So now you kind of see the problem with some of the techniques that have worked in the past, like Keynesian economics and in Roosevelt, is we made things here. So when we got money in people's pockets, we shared, most of the money stayed here. Now most of the money is going overseas. And this chart shows that we just don't make much anymore. 46,000 factories closed in the last decade. And you can see that in 1950, about 30% of the workforce was in manufacturing, and now it's only about 10%, and about 13 million jobs. So, so there you go. We just don't have enough jobs to go around. This is what's happened to manufacturing jobs. So we need to start connecting the dots. Like, you want to know why we don't have enough jobs? There's nothing to say just because we have all those people that we're going to have enough jobs unless we have policies to do that. So then you've probably heard, here we've got a few more slides, just to kind of drive this home, which makes it really sad, like all these iconic Americana products that are no longer made in the USA. I'll just highlight a few. Born in the USA in 1850, Levi's jeans haven't been made in the United States since 2003. They're made in Latin America and Asia. The Etch-a-Sketch over there, it still might say Ohio Art, like up here in the frame. See how it says Ohio Art, that little logo? Well, the company decided after 40 years that paying $9 an hour to their union workers was just too much, so they moved operations to China in 2000. And Dell Computer held out longer than anybody, but facing pressure because from competition that had already moved overseas, they closed their last plant in 2010. So I think of it as outsourcing in business is kind of like steroids in baseball. Once one person starts doing it, everyone else has to follow suit to compete. And now let's look at One of my favorite companies, Apple, the iPhone, look at where most of the money goes. $61 to Japanese workers for parts, $30 to German workers, $23 to South Korean workers, $6 to Chinese workers for assembly, and only $11 goes to American workers for research and design. So I think what this shows is that corporate profits and American jobs are getting more and more disconnected. They have figured out a way that they can make lots of money because they have not only workers around the world, but now they have a lot of customers around the world, especially China, India, and Brazil. They don't need us anymore. And corporations are not patriotic. Their mission statement is always the same: increase the value for the shareholders. And if they can do that better overseas, then that's what they're going to do. I mean, Caterpillar hired 15,000 new workers last year. Half of them were overseas. So then you've probably heard, well, we're now a service economy. We don't need to make anything anymore because we're a service economy. All right, well, here's the problem with that. Bob has a nice job in an American collection agency. Bob's job is outsourced to Waleed in Pakistan. Unemployed Bob runs up debt on his credit card. Waleed calls Bob from Pakistan to harass him about his unpaid credit card. Meanwhile, Waleed's job is outsourced to Zaire in Bangladesh. So you see the problem with this is that with technology, it's very easy to outsource service jobs. Plus, a lot of customers are doing things online, so it's self-serve. Every time I go into the bank, which I like to go into the bank personally, and then every once in a while a teller will say, you know, you could do all this online. And I say, yes, but if I did it online, then you wouldn't have a job. You need to thank all the people that are on this, all right? So unless we want to work for about $1 an hour, like Chinese workers, we need to turn the ship around. So here's some policies for long-term growth. And I probably touched on this, but we need to practice fair trade, not free trade. We need to protect American industries. We used to have, before Reagan, we had import tariffs for almost 200 years before Reagan. Import tariffs, so when things came into this country, had a tariff of about 30 to 40%. That was to protect our domestic industries, okay? Now they're down to about 2%. Again, let's start connecting the dots of what's happening here. And back then, before 1980, did you know the United States was the largest exporter of manufactured goods, and we were also the largest creditor. So, and now this has been completely flopped on its head. And how about we reserve our tax breaks and taxpayer dollars for companies truly based on American soil with American workers? No more hiring Dubai-based Halliburton, for example. How about some patriotic tax and hiring policies? I mean, if we're going to use taxpayer dollars, right, to hire a company, to build a road, how about, or to make something, how about we make sure that as part of that policy, it says that it has to be American workers. There's no reason why we can't do that. We're not talking about the free market now. We're talking about how we use our government taxpayer dollars. Okay, so now this is what happens is the race to the bottom is countries compete to attract business. So we have Mexico and we have the multinational corporations now that are the masters, the bosses. You have Mexico saying, I'll let you degrade my environment. China saying, I'm cheap and only 13. And USA saying, I'll do anything, please, I need to work. Okay, well, some of my friends said, Andrew, I'm afraid that cartoon might be too offensive, but I thought that the truth that it highlights is really what's offensive. That we've basically, with all of our outsourcing, we basically become middlemen. We become slaves to multinational corporations. And just to highlight this point, remember after the BP explosion that killed 11 workers and probably polluted our Gulf forever? And do you remember Obama actually got blowback from workers down in the Gulf when he tried to just have a temporary moratorium on deep water drilling just to make sure it was safe? So I'm like, how desperate are rig workers that they prefer to risk being blown up than lose a few weeks or months of work? I mean, this is the situation that we've put ourselves in, or that our policies have put us in. Now compare this to South Korea. By practicing our American-style protectionism for just the last 50 years, so they've had high import tariffs on things coming in. They've taken their median, their annual income for the average family in 1960 was $400. They were basically a poor nation. Now it's 32,000.